All right, we're live here at SEC Media Days, day 4. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Jeff Howe. We have sat in on all of the media sessions for Texas players, as well as Texas coach Steve Sarkisian. 3 different viewing periods for Steve Sarkisian, but he dropped the bomb in the middle of the main media session on SEC Network. He announces that John Meredith, one of the nation's top overall players in the class of 2027, has reclassified into the class of 2026. John Meredith will be on campus and a Texas Longhorn in August of this year and be available immediately to play this season. Now, will he actually play much, or is this just him accelerating a year? I will say this, there's another player on this roster that accelerated a year, and that's Richard Wesley, and they've had nothing but great things to say about him today. Jerry Hamilton talked to Colin Simmons about Richard Wesley. He said a nice thing. But let's start and let's talk a little bit more about Steve Sarkisian and his overall thoughts, your main takeaway here on this live chat we're doing here in Tampa at SEC Media Days.
I may be reading way too much into this, Bobby, and chances I've done it before. I'll probably do it again. I just feel like Sark likes this team. I think he's confident in this team. He's also at the point too where he's far enough in his tenure to where I don't know if he's guarded as much when he's speaking publicly and some of these things as he was. He did drop some expletives when referring to playing Parker Livingston when Texas plays Oklahoma. Made it very clear he was not happy about the Mike Elko video that played on the Jumbotron after Texas beat Texas A&M. But I thought it was interesting. We talked about it a lot here on the channel, is the penalty issue. I think that was and Hank South actually asked Sark about penalties. And I thought it was interesting, Bobby. We've heard Sark talk about they needed to get fixed, but we haven't heard how. And now to hear him say that Torrey Becton's taken a part in some of the punishment for things done wrong. And, when a player is penalized in the practice, the whole position group gets punished. So Sark feels like just reinforcing it that way and making it like a group punishment instead of an individual punishment. He does feel like that's worked. Anything to make Texas not triple digits in penalty yardage or penalties this year, I'm all for it. So that is one thing that the ground this team can make up, especially in the close games where the margins are so small. If you're just a little more buttoned up, that could make the difference between you being 9-3 and on the outside looking in and 11-1 and being in the catbirds.
Here, let me add this to it. He owned it too. He's like, I have no interest in being 132nd in penalties. He goes, that's ridiculous.
Good. Because none of us do either.
Yeah, but to his point, he's like, look, that doesn't in the list of things that correlate to winning.
Yeah,
penalties don't necessarily correlate that heavily to winning or losing. Other things do, like ball time of possession or even turnovers in particular, right? But what he did say is, I don't want that to be indicative of what our program is about. We want to be more disciplined. He said it starts off the field and continues on the field, in his opinion. And maybe he had a young team last year. To your point, I like the point that he made is he made penalties a team penalty during workouts this year, as opposed to just one player doing 10 push-ups. All of them were doing 10 push-ups. So perhaps that carries forward. Yeah. We see a little bit better execution. Let's talk about his talent too, though. That was another.
Are we on right now?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay. The offense turned the ball over way too much there I am. Offense turned the ball over way too much in 2024. They made it a point to make sure ball security wasn't an issue. And, they were one of the best ball security teams in the country last year. Fumbles weren't a problem. Arch didn't throw it to the other team. So I'm hoping penalties, run game, some of that other stuff that we talked about, the physicality element of it, I hope some of that stuff gets corrected after he's emphasized it. And where I was going with that was, if you're emphasizing physicality, hiring Barge Luke and hiring Will Muschamp, I think those two hires, given that those guys have a ton of experience in the SEC, they're tough-minded coaches, that mentality coming from the top down, bleeding through to the players, that could take care of some of those issues too, Bob.
Look, we're going to see a lot of different things come out of this. The comment he made, I want to turn next, about Parker Livingston. He was asked about, what are we going to do now that Parker Livingston, guy that played for you, is on the other side in the rivalry? He said, I want to kick his ass.
Yeah.
Now, it was theoretical or metaphor, however you want to put that. But Sark didn't pull any punches. He said, "Look, I appreciate the idea of this rivalry in college football, but make no mistake, as much as he likes or dislikes, I guess, the fact that Parker Livingston transferred, he keeps the eye on the ball as far as it relates to the Texas OU rivalry."
He did also, and Sark at the end of his spiel said, hey, after the game, I'll probably give him a big hug, but before then, I want to beat his ass. And I've been thinking about this in relation to the OU game and the A&M game. Again, one thing you can say about Sark from the positive, he's coached really well in these rivalry games. The A&M game last year, for all the faults of the offense, trust me, the offense had plenty of faults last year. I felt like his adjustments and the play calling flow in the second half of the A&M game might have been the best it was all year. I thought he did a really good job making adjustments the second half of that game. He's been really good going head-to-head against Brent Venables in the OU game. And I think it's just it's kind of – I'm not going to say it's real similar, Bobby, to the way not an apples-to-apples comparison, but thinking back to the way Bob Stoops used to approach the Texas game, where from the Texas side it would be, it's just another game, blah, blah, blah. Bob Stoops was up front. This is not just another game. This is a life or death situation for us. And Sark's not saying it that way, but you can tell when he speaks about the rivalries, there's a reason typically why in those games Texas has shown up.
All right, so let's talk a little bit now, Jeff, before we take some questions here on this live stream. We're not going to have a Thursday night live stream, by the way. I want to mention that because we're going to all be traveling back to Austin and parts in between. But, Jeff, I want to move on to the players that you saw and got an availability. Texas brought Arch Manning, Colin Simmons, as well as Trevor Gooseby. Major takeaways for you?
For me, I liked, Trevor Gooseby. I thought he had one of the most honest answers when talking about the run game. Because I asked him, hey, from an O-line standpoint, personally for you, where did you guys feel like you needed to correct some things in the run game? He said, honestly, we weren't physical enough. He said, I wasn't physical enough. So for your leader at left tackle, your potential first-round pick, to be the guy that said, hey, we weren't physical enough, I wasn't physical enough, that's got to change. I liked hearing that from him. Colin Simmons anytime he talks about Will Muschamp, like you see the smile over his face, like he is elated to be playing for Will Muschamp. Actually, when he was leaving the electronic media room, we were joking a little bit because he was talking about the NCAA video game, College Football 27. He said he was playing against Cam Coleman. Cam Coleman's playing as Texas and picks Colin Simmons as the guy he's controlling, drops him into coverage and gets pick six. And Colin says, I didn't know my guy in the video game was fast enough, so that's good. And then, we're joking with Colin afterwards, and somebody asked him, hey, you going to ask Muschamp to drop you into coverage more? And Colin just kind of said, no. So we want that guy attacking the line of scrimmage, as Will Muschamp has said, Bobby. You don't train a thoroughbred to run backwards. You want your guys attacking. So Colin Simmons, he does feel like there's another level he can get to under Will Muschamp. And considering how good he's been for the first 2 years, if you're talking about getting into another level, now you're talking about first-team All-American type stuff, national awards, top of the first round type stuff if he gets to that level. And he feels like Will Muschamp's the guy to help him get there.
We talk about all that. Arch Manning is the apple of everyone's eye whenever he walked around. I literally went to the elevator banks today, and there were 4 girls between 18 and 22. And they go, is Arch Manning here? They literally asked me. I'm like, yeah, he's down the hall. And, of course, they scurried that way. I kind of chuckled because there's, like, security guards here.
Way to go, Bobby. Way to go, having people chasing QB1 around the hotel.
But my point being is he's, in many ways, that is akin to what's happening to him on Media Row. From the minute they arrived this afternoon, he has been followed, covered, all of the things you could possibly think about, appearing on shows nationwide, etc. That being said, it seems like it's less than a year ago, actually. Maybe it was the newness of Arch last year and then him going through some trials and tribulations and people actually realizing that he's human and doesn't wear a cape every day as Superman. I think it felt a little more, while it was engrossing, I don't think it was as much hysteria as we saw last year. Perhaps also because this is the last day And the media row is starting to thin out right now too.
It's the only guys I've been able to compare Arch to, and I'm not talking about in terms of like the athletic profile or anything like that, but in terms of the hype and the attention, the only guys I can compare it to that I've seen are LeBron James and Bryce Harper. Maybe you throw Tiger in there, but everything you do is going to be scrutinized and it's under the microscope, and you're constantly in that spotlight. And I thought Arch, to his credit, one of the best answers he gave today was he was asked, hey, what's the difference between where you were a year ago going into the Ohio State game and where you are now going into year two? And he said, I think I'm more present. He said that was his goal in the offseason. Stay present, be in the moment, take it day by day. And I know that sounds cliche, but for him, it's impossible to grasp, Bobby, everything he's dealing with in terms of the external expectations and the noise. You got to try to simplify that as much as possible. So for him to be in a position where he feels like at least he's doing a better job of staying present, I think that shows growth and maturity on his part.
Good. All right, we're going to take some questions now here on this live stream, as we normally do. David Van Derven with the super chat. Sark said he was not happy. Can you provide context? We sure can. We sure can, David. It was in relation to a video that played after Texas beat Texas A&M last year in Austin. On the scoreboard after the game, they played a video of Mike Elko saying that Texas A&M was the flagship university of the state of Texas. And Sark thought that was in poor taste, apparently, and said as much. That's the context of why Sark said he was unhappy about that. He just didn't feel like it was becoming of Texas to play that video at that time.
Yeah, I think the other part of that too, the question was asked to him, the way it was phrased, it was asked about the troll job on Mike Elko. I think Sark took exception to that. But, to that point, he did say he had a team in College Station 2 years ago that was trying to plant a flag in the middle of the field. And he said, we're not going to do that. That's not going to happen. And he shot that down. So, yeah, that's but I think too, the way the question was phrased too, it got Sark's ire up a little bit.
All right. This one from Mello. If John Meredith is a key factor on your defense, then that's a terrible sign, in my opinion.
Have we said he's going to be a key factor?
No, we haven't. And I think that's where we need to take this put it in the context it needs. John Meredith reclassifying to 2026. First of all, from a recruiting perspective, he was not going to be allowed to play in the state of Texas in 2026.
Well, he could. He would have had to have gone back to, I think,
gone
back to Trinity. I think the option was there. Maybe Burleson Centennial, I think, was an option for him, but he could not play at North Crowley.
No. But my point is, he had then started looking at schools in South Florida.
Yeah.
If you're Texas and recruiting a player, you would rather him be on your campus than down in South Florida, 100%. Where Miami and Mario Cristobal can sit there and try to get you onto their campus during a game. So nobody is saying John Meredith's going to get on the field game one. That they will say, however, that I think it's a big sign of Texas being able to lasso one of the best players in the class of 2027 and moving him into class of 2026.
Now, I'll say this, is he going to take Bo Masco's job or Cade Phillips' job or Grayson Littleton's job? Probably not. Can he come in and compete with Smoke Matthews and Warren Roberson and maybe Wardell Mack for some of those snaps? What would it be, Bobby? Probably 8 to 12 snaps per game. Could he compete with those guys for it? Maybe, but like you said, at the very least, this might be, and I got my own thoughts on guys reclassifying. This might be the lesser of all evils at this point is, hey, basically just with 5 for 5 now, you can play a little bit, not worry about the 4-game thing. So basically treat this as kind of a redshirt year, developmental year where he can get his feet wet. And then, if you have a situation where, hey, maybe Bo Masco goes pro and maybe you have some defections to the portal or whatever, now you've got John Meredith and you've got with a fall underneath him and he's primed for a bigger role when you get to next spring.
All right. Trying to wrap this up and put a bow on it. Texas is talented. Sark agrees with us. He's telling us they are.
Yeah.
Sark wants to execute better. one of the other things that I thought he spoke about that I asked him personally in the local media session, and then he was asked in the major media session, how does he get his offense off to a better start earlier in the season? And his response was, we got to dance with the one who brung you a little bit. He said, we got to execute the plays that we can execute. And he also says, I've got to get them ready to go. And that means that second game of the season against Ohio State and Columbus, not to mention Texas State in the opener.
There's a couple things there. I think one, the last 2 years, the offense hasn't had an identity. Even 24, when they were one of the most explosive offenses in the country, they didn't have an identity. Where are you going to hang your hat on? I think the other part of starting faster is hopefully with a year together with Arch as a starter and Sark calling plays, it shouldn't take you a few games to figure out what gets Arch in a rhythm, what gets him comfortable, what can get him off to a good start. So that's going to change your opening script. It's going to change your call sheet. So hopefully you've streamlined that a little bit. And Bobby, going back to where we started, if Texas isn't in the college football playoff, it's not going to be because they lack talent or they're talent deficient. It's going to be because they were undisciplined. And to your point about execution, it's because they didn't improve playing situational football. Third down, red zone, 2 minute, in the half. That's where this team needs to be more buttoned.
Boy, good way to put that. This coming in from Justin Yarbrough. Great job this week, fellas. Thanks, Justin, for the super chat. Sark's tough to beat on the mic. He is indeed, and owns up to problems without hesitation. Proud of him being our head coach. Does he own up to problems about as well as any Texas coach has? I mean, in the maybe Charlie Strong owned up to him as well. Mac didn't. I like Mac.
I love Charlie personally. Charlie sometimes owned up to problems to a fault where, okay, maybe you shouldn't have gone that far in telling us what the problem was. But yeah, I mean, Sark does a pretty good job.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, overall.
I think this, Bobby, no coach, no head coach is going to be 100% transparent. That's somewhere on the sliding scale. I think Sark's fairly high on the sliding scale for me, especially compared to some other guys that have been in that job.
One last thing I want to mention before we let folks go here is this. Sark immediately, when he went to the podium, said, look, these three guys we brought here are all high school recruits. They've developed within our culture. We're proud of them. We're happy they're here. Is that, I almost asked him a question. Is that part of your recruiting pitch? Like, look, come develop with us and you'll end up in places like SEC Media Days in Tampa with potential first-round grades on all three of those guys.
Well, look at the positions those guys play. That's where you need to evaluate, recruit, and develop at a high level. Quarterback, edge rusher, left tackle, because we talked about it a lot. Going into the portal to get those pieces is really expensive. And the fact that you didn't have to do it, that lets you go get – maybe if you had to go get, Bobby, a left tackle, maybe you couldn't have gotten Hollywood Smothers and Raleek Brown. But now you're able to get both of them because you've got some structure there with Trevor Gooseby. You're able to put some pieces around Colin Simmons because you're structured there. To your point about and those positions specifically, I thought kind of put a pin in this. I thought Jerry actually asked one of the best questions Sark got today about KJ Lacey's development, because every year Sark has been here, there's been a point where you needed to use the backup quarterback. Now, Arch started every game last year. Do you win that game against Mississippi State if it's anybody but Matthew Caldwell doing what he did in overtime? So, law of that, knock on wood, I hope Arch is healthy all year and plays every game. But history tells you you're going to need the backup quarterback. So, continuing to develop that position is huge. So, we'll have at some point, hopefully, I think on video, we'll have Sark's answer to Jerry's question about KJ Lacey. Just put a pin in that in case, October, November, we're coming back to it.
We may be re-listening to it, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Hey, this one from Sailor Joe. Sark on A&M troll. I'm upset. I have respect. Sark on Livingston, belt to ass. That is kind of true. But I think that I will say, again, context matters. It really does. He was being a little cheeky, I think, with Parker, Livingston, and OU as a whole, knowing that, look, they have to go play that game with our friends over in College Station. I think it felt more like, hey, I didn't like the troll job. It felt more, he didn't want to be complicit in that. Whereas he feels like Parker made his own bed, and by choosing to go to OU.
I think it's, I think to an extent, it's got something to do with control. You know, when you've got a player on your roster that you're talking numbers with, you can control that as much as a coach can control it in college football today. If somebody in the booth goes rogue and plays a video while you're down on the sideline dealing with stuff, you don't have control over that. So that's probably, and again, I think the way the A&M question was phrased to Sark again, that didn't help the response.
And it was a local College Station reporter that asked that question. Yeah. To be fair. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of On Texas Football's live stream. Following up on Steve Sarkisian, I want to say thank you to our sponsor. You guys know we're always looking for ways to watch games and make it a little more fun. That's exactly why we love Prize Picks. It's America's #1 sports pick app, and honestly, it's about as simple as it gets. For player picks, all you do is go choose more or less on a few players' stats and lock in your lineup. That's it. And if you're someone who likes picking teams instead of individual players, Prize Picks has you covered there too. You can now pick the winner, the spread, or the total on games and even fights. Prize Picks is available in most states, including Texas, California, and Florida. So chances are you can jump in today. And one of my favorite features is that you can follow users on the app. If you like the picks they're making, you can tail them with one click. Now, here's the best part. If you've never tried Prize Picks, play your first $5 lineup, and if you win, you'll get $150 in bonus lineups. Just make sure you use code HMA when you sign up. They actually just updated the offer, so there's never been a better time to get started. Download the Prize Pick app today. Use code HMA. Play that first $5 lineup, and if you win, you'll get $150 in bonus lineups. That's Prize Picks, code HMA. Good luck, and as always, play smart, play responsibly, play Prize Picks. Jeff, final thoughts from Tampa before we close up.
I'll be honest. My final thought: I'm kind of ready to get back to Austin.
Same. Ready to see the significant other.
I'm ready. Talking season's over. I'm ready for camp to get here. Let's talk about stuff actually happening on the field.
I talked to Sark a little bit about that in that local media deal. August 4th, August 5th. So we're about 2 weeks away from today. Them getting the chin straps buckled up again, shoulder pads on. I'm ready for it, man. I'm ready for it. All right, that's going to do it from here in Tampa. I'm Bobby Burton. He's Jeff Howe. Thanks especially to our producer, Matt Hutchison, carrying us through technical difficulties as always. You guys have a good week. Take care now. Hook 'em horns. We'll have a lot more video content and written content on ontexasfootball.com coming soon.